The sky above Germany belonged to us. They said no Allied fighter could reach Berlin and return. They were right, until the day the Silver Ghosts arrived. Berlin, February 1944. The morning light bled cold and pale through the heavy clouds. The kind of winter sun that didn't warm, only revealed. Hauptmann Erich Vogel, a Luftwaffe ace with 29 confirmed kills, adjusted his oxygen mask and pushed his Messerschmitt Bf 109 through the thinning mist. Below him, the black puffs of flak blossomed around the incoming American bombers, endless silver dots crawling across the horizon. He'd fought them before. B-17 seconds. Easy targets, once their escorts turned back reliably at the Rhine. The sky above Germany was his domain, or at least it had been. Bomber stream, 2 o'clock. His wingman called over the radio. Erich smiled grimly. Just another day in paradise. He throttled up. The deep, powerful Merlin growl of his opponent still haunted him, but that was over the channel. Not here. Not this deep into the rake. No Allied fighter had the range to reach Berlin and come back alive. That was the one decisive advantage the Luftwaffe still held. Distance. Then, over the static, a tremor of panic crackled. Jets. No, not jets. They're Mustangs. Erich frowned. The idea unmöglich. Impossible. But then he saw them. A line of silver streaks diving relentlessly out of the sun, contrails like sharp metallic swords, sleek, elegant, and utterly unfamiliar. Not the stubby thunderbolts he'd mocked before. These were something new, sharp as razors, moving with a predator's calm. Before he could roll, the first burst hit. 50 caliber tracers tore through his right wing, ripping metal like paper. He banked hard, but the Mustang stayed glued to him. Impossibly steady. Another burst, and his canopy shattered into fragments. He ejected into a sky suddenly filled with fire and overwhelming disbelief. As his parachute opened, he saw something that froze him more than fear ever could. The B-17 seconds were still flying, and so were their escorts. No one turned back. The Luftwaffe's iron curtain of air supremacy had shattered in a single morning. On the ground, radar operators watched their screens go blank. One whispered, "The Americans have conquered the sky." That day, 68 German fighters were destroyed. Only 11 Mustangs were lost. The myth of the untouchable Reich had burned up somewhere above Berlin, dissolved into the contrails of a new kind of engineering. A plane designed not for perfection, but for endurance. The P-51 Mustang had arrived, and from that day on, the sky over Europe would never belong to Germany again. Before the Mustang became a symbol of American air power, before it broke the back of the Luftwaffe, it was a mistake, a fluke, born of desperation and perfect timing. In 1940, Britain was bleeding pilots over the Channel. Spitfires were fast, but they couldn't fly far enough. Hurricanes were tough, but slow. The Royal Air Force needed more planes, and fast, so they went shopping. North American Aviation, NAA, a young, unproven American company, wasn't even supposed to build a new fighter. The British initially wanted them to license-produce the P-40 Warhawk, an aging Curtiss design. But one man said no. His name was James Dutch Kindleberger, NAA's CEO. He told the RAF, "Give us 120 days, and we'll build you something better." They thought he was insane. 4 months to design a fighter from scratch. He didn't blink. Behind him stood Dr. Ernst Klaus, a brilliant, German-born engineer who understood two things better than anyone alive: airflow and speed. Klaus didn't care about politics or permission. He cared only about performance. He believed that most fighters were too fat, too drag-heavy, too obsessed with armor and horsepower. He wanted elegance, a machine that cut through the sky instead of fighting against it. But there was a problem. The U.S. Army Air Corps didn't want the plane. They thought it was too experimental, too British in its origin. The RAF ordered 320 anyway, on faith alone, and what rolled out of the North American factory just 117 days later didn't look like anything else in the world. The engineers had invented a new kind of wing, A laminar flow design that smoothed airflow and reduced drag by 40%. The fuselage was long and lean, the cockpit streamlined like a bullet. Even the radiator, normally a drag-heavy lump, was tucked cleverly into the belly, doubling as a miniature jet booster by using exhaust heat to create forward thrust. Meredith effect. But when it first flew, something was critically off. The early Mustangs, powered by the Allison V1710 engine, could scream at low altitude, but they choked violently above 15,000 feet. No high-altitude bite. The perfect body had the wrong heart. The U.Z. Army nearly killed the project right there. But then came the British gamble, one that would rewrite aviation history. They ripped out the Allison engine and dropped in a Rolls-Royce Merlin, the same powerful plant that made the Spitfire sing. It was an act of heresy, mixing American design with a British soul. And when the prototype flew again over Boscombe Down in late 1942, test pilot Ronald Harker radioed back just 6 words that changed the war. The Mustang is now a thoroughbred. The speed, 437 miles per hour. The climb rate, 4,000 feet per minute. The range, unbelievable, twice that of any Allied fighter. The plane that shouldn't have worked had suddenly become the best in the world. The RAF couldn't believe it. The Luftwaffe couldn't explain it. And the Americans, well, they almost didn't get it in time to save their bombers. What began as an accidental experiment was about to become the weapon that ended the air war. And it all started because one company refused to build someone else's plane. Picture this. Inglewood, California, 1940. The world is on fire. Europe's cities are burning. And the United States hasn't even entered the war yet. Inside a hangar that smells of oil and mounting panic, North American aviation is a beehive of motion. Hundreds of engineers, mechanics, and draftsmen sleep in shifts beneath drafting tables. Deadlines are gospel. Their mission: design, build, and fly an entirely new fighter from blueprint to sky in 117 days. At the center of the chaos is Dr. Ernst Klaus, the aeronautical genius who once worked for Messerschmitt before fleeing to America. To him, aircraft aren't machines. They're creatures of the air. And this one, he insists, must breathe differently. He sketches late into the night. Cigarette smoke curling over blueprints. The air doesn't forgive, he tells his team. So we will not ask it for permission. Every part of the Mustang is a rebellion against the old rules of fighter design. Most planes of the time were built with brute force. Thick wings, heavy rivets, overpowered engines, forced to push through drag. Klaus wanted the opposite. Grace through physics. He studies airflow with chalk and string, drawing invisible lines through the hangar air. The result is the laminar flow wing, one of the most revolutionary ideas in aviation history. Instead of creating turbulence, the Mustang's wings slip through it, delaying drag, extending range, and turning speed into endurance. It's not just clever, it's art. The fuselage, razor thin. The radiator, not a weakness anymore, but a hidden weapon. Its exhaust heat channeling backward to generate thrust. The cockpit set high and sleek, giving pilots a full 360 degrees of view, something no German fighter offered at the time. And the body hand-sculpted aluminum, polished so smooth that air refused to cling. By day 102, the prototype, designated NA-73X, rolls out of the hangar. It looks fast, just sitting still. On October 26th, 1940, test pilot Captain Leo Vance climbs into the cockpit. He's a civilian, and he's terrified. This thing looks like it should fly, but no one knows if it actually will. He throttles forward. The Allison engine roars. The plane shakes, lifts, and then effortlessly slices into the California sky. The crew below cheers wildly. Klaus just watches quietly, cigarette burning low, his eyes tracking the glint of sunlight on the Mustang's wings. It's flying. Clean. Stable. Silent. No rattling, no turbulence, just air obeying metal. When Vance lands, he pulls off his helmet and grins. "It's like flying a knife," he says. "The team has done the impossible." In 117 days, they built a prototype that's faster, smoother, and more efficient than anything America or Germany has ever made. But Klaus isn't satisfied. "Speed is nothing without soul," he mutters. "We have the body now. We need the heart." He doesn't know it yet, but that heart, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, is waiting across the Atlantic. And when they finally meet, this machine will stop being just a fighter. It will become a legend. By early 1943, Allied command had a problem that no amount of courage could fix: arithmetic. Every daylight bombing raid sent over Germany meant hundreds of B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds flying deep into enemy territory without protection. The Luftwaffe's fighters, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, waited like wolves at the edge of the range line. The numbers were brutal. On one raid over Schweinfurt and Regensburg, 376 bombers went in. Only 147 came back. Over 10,000 American airmen were lost in 6 weeks. The average life expectancy of a bomber crewman was 12 missions. The Allies didn't lack bravery. They lacked reach. Their best escort fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolt and the British Spitfire, simply couldn't follow the bombers to Berlin and back. They had the claws, but not the wingspan. Enter the P-51 Mustang, a machine whose design math broke every rule of aerial logic. Engineers calculated that with drop tanks and the new Merlin engine, the Mustang could stay in the air for 6.5 hours, covering nearly 1,650 miles, double the range of the P-47. At 30,000 feet, it could hit 440 miles per hour, climb faster than the Spitfire, and still carry firepower heavy enough to shred a bomber. For the first time, America had a plane that could go to Berlin, fight, and come home. The stats made generals salivate and Luftwaffe officers shiver. Combat radius, 750 miles. Top speed, 437 miles per hour. Ceiling, 41,000 feet. Fuel economy, 5.8 mpg in a warplane. Kill ratio, 19-1 by 1,945. But numbers only tell half the story. Because what really made the Mustang a miracle wasn't just its engineering, it was the ecosystem behind it. Factories in Inglewood, Dallas, and Long Beach churned out Mustangs like clockwork, one every 66 minutes. And every single one was identical enough that mechanics could swap wings, canopies, even engines between squadrons in hours. The Luftwaffe, once the most technologically advanced air force in the world, couldn't keep up. They built perfection. America built multiplication. A German report intercepted in 1944 said it best: "We no longer fight aircraft. We fight a system." Each Mustang wasn't just a plane. It was a math equation. Speed plus range plus numbers equals air superiority. And once that equation worked, the Luftwaffe's entire defense network started to collapse. When the first long-range Mustangs appeared over Berlin, German pilots didn't just face new planes. They faced an enemy that had rewritten the physics of war itself. The sky was no longer a battlefield. It had become a factory. March 4th, 1944. Dawn over the English countryside. Rows of silver bombers stretch across the misty airfields of East Anglia. B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds lumber down the runways, engines shaking the frost off the grass. Each one loaded with high explosives bound for Berlin, the heart of Hitler's empire. Until now, these missions were near suicidal. They'd cross the Rhine, lose their escorts, and vanish into the cauldron of German flak and fighters. But this morning was different. Overhead, P-51 Mustangs form up in shimmering arrowheads. Their Merlin engines hum like a choir of steel. Painted on their noses are names written in love and rage: Old Crow, Big Beautiful Doll, Shangri-La. At their head flies Colonel Marcus Blake, commander of the 4th Fighter Group, a man who once said, "The only way to fight a war is to kill bastards faster than they can breed." His Mustangs have a new mission: follow the bombers all the way to Berlin and bring them back alive. They climb to 25,000 feet. The sun hits their wings like fire. And for the first time in the war, American pilots watched the entire horizon open up, not just the Channel, not just France, but Germany itself. Inside the Luftwaffe's control centers, panic spreads. Radar screens flicker with dozens of incoming blips moving faster than expected. They can't be fighters, one officer mutters, but they are, over Bremen. The first contact. German Bf 109 seconds dive in from above. Confident. Routine. But something's wrong. The Mustangs don't peel away. They climb to meet them. At 27,000 feet, a dogfight erupts that will be remembered for decades. The Luftwaffe pilots, trained to expect American escorts to turn back, suddenly find themselves trapped. The P-51 seconds dive, roll, and climb again, their engines roaring with a pitch no one has heard before. Captain Donatello, one of Blake's aces, shoots down two 109 seconds in 30 seconds. He radios in, "Berlin Express, now open for business." Below, the bombers continue unmolested. For the first time in years, the B-17 seconds actually make it to Berlin and drop their payloads. The factories, rail yards, and oil refineries that fed the Nazi war machine erupt in black fire. By the time the formation turns home, 68 German fighters have been destroyed. The Americans lose only 11. Over England, as the Mustangs land, their ground crews can't believe what they're hearing. Berlin has been hit, and the escorts came back. That night, in the underground command bunker outside Berlin, a Luftwaffe general studies the casualty list. He circles one name, then another, then throws the report across the room. "They can reach us now," he whispers. "There is no safe sky." The next morning, propaganda radio tells German civilians that the American bombers will soon be destroyed. But outside, every contrail crossing the sky tells a different story. The myth of the invincible Luftwaffe, the one that had ruled Europe's skies since 1939, was ending. And it was ending not with jets or wonder weapons, but with a handful of silver fighters designed in 117 days by men who refused to follow the rules. The war had just tilted, and from that day forward, the Luftwaffe would never recover. By the summer of 1944, the air war over Europe had become a slaughter not for the Americans, but for the Luftwaffe. The numbers told a story no propaganda could hide. At the start of the year, Germany had nearly 2,000 operational fighters. 6 months later, barely 400 remained combat-ready. Their factories still produced planes, but not pilots. Training time had fallen from a year to just 3 weeks. The reason: the Mustangs. They weren't just killing planes, they were killing momentum. Every bomber escorted by a Mustang forced Germany to react. Every dogfight burned fuel, time, and men the Reich no longer had. Each P-51 carried not just guns, but an equation the Germans couldn't solve. Speed plus reach plus numbers equals collapse. Over France, the kill ratios became obscene. By August, U.S. pilots were reporting 1-5-on-1 victories. Squadrons like the 357th Fighter Group and the 4th Eagle Group turned the sky into a hunting ground. They didn't wait to defend the bombers anymore. They went looking for fights. Some pilots flew 6-hour sorties, running down German aircraft as they tried to land, even strafing airfields where Me 109 seconds and FW 190 seconds were still warming up. The Luftwaffe's elite men like Galland and Hartmann called them ghosts. They'd appear high, silent from the sun, dive once, and vanish. The kill lists grew insane. Captain Scott, 6 in a single day. Major Evans, 16 victories without being hit once. But the secret wasn't just skill, it was systems. The U.S. built a logistical machine that kept the Mustangs flying faster than they could be shot down. Every part was interchangeable. Every pilot had reserves. Every engine had backups. German mechanics, working with shattered factories and fuel shortages, couldn't even replace spark plugs. Their jets, The vaunted Me-262 seconds sat grounded, waiting for parts that would never come. Meanwhile, the Mustang's Packard-built Merlin engine ran cleaner, cooler, and stronger with every upgrade. Pilots pushed it beyond limits. Redline meant nothing. They flew it until it screamed and it still held together. By September 1944, Air forces had destroyed over 8,000 enemy aircraft in Europe. The Luftwaffe's dream of air dominance had evaporated, not in one battle, but in thousands of quiet equations written in the sky. Historians call it the death spiral of air power. Germany built perfection precision machines that demanded perfect conditions. America built abundance good enough, reliable, unstoppable. One P-51 could fly from England to Berlin and back, fight in 2 dogfights, and still have fuel left to strafe a train on the way home. By autumn, the Luftwaffe couldn't even protect its own factories. Every flight school, every test facility, every assembly line, all within range. The sky wasn't contested anymore. It was occupied. In a single year, the balance of the entire European war flipped because of one aircraft that combined the mind of an engineer, the reach of an empire, and the courage of the men who refused to turn back. The Mustang didn't just win dogfights. It won the war of meth. And when numbers win, empires fall. August 1944. The target Schweinfurt, Germany's ball-bearing capital. Without it, the Luftwaffe's entire machine would seize like a broken watch. The last time the U.S. hit this city, hundreds of B-17 seconds never came home. The Germans called it Fortress Hell. But this time, the bombers weren't alone. High above the clouds, P-51 Mustangs streaked ahead, silver flashes under the burning sun, their drop tanks gleaming like mirrors. Their mission wasn't just escort, it was eradication. At 0900 hours, the Luftwaffe took the bait. Dozens of Me-109 seconds and FW-190 seconds scrambled, racing to intercept the bomber stream. They expected the old game: hit hard, dive away, vanish before American fighters arrived. But as they broke through the clouds, the game was already over. Mustangs were waiting, high, patient, and invisible until the last second. The first wave of German fighters dove in, confident, then met 50 caliber fire so dense it looked like liquid metal. 109 seconds disintegrated before they could even level off. The sky erupted into a cage of contrails, tracers, and tumbling wreckage. Captain Donatello led his flight like a conductor leading a symphony of chaos. Brake left, dive under, hit the wingman first, he barked. Every move was instinct, every shot measured. He looped his Mustang under a smoking bomber, rolled up and hit a German ace square through the canopy. Donatello radioed one sentence that became legend. "We are not escorting anymore. We're hunting." Below, the B-17 seconds flew undisturbed. Their formation stayed tight. Their bombs fell clean. Schweinfurt's factories vanished in thunder and fire. When the Mustangs reformed for the flight home, their fuel gauges were empty, but their kill tallies weren't. That single mission cost the Luftwaffe 38 fighters. The Americans lost 4. The next morning, reconnaissance photos showed the truth. Germany's precision industry was crippled. Entire lines of engines, guns, and aircraft were halted. It wasn't just an air victory. It was a systemic execution. The Luftwaffe command tried to spin it as a temporary setback. But their pilots knew better. Their radar stations tracked the same pattern day after day. The bombers came, the Mustangs followed, and nothing survived the crossing. A German mechanic wrote in his diary, "We don't repair planes anymore. We bury them." That day, Schweinfurt wasn't just a bombing target. It was proof that air superiority wasn't a theory anymore. It was law. Every Mustang sortie tightened the noose. Every destroyed fighter meant one less defense for Berlin. By autumn, German aces refused to scramble. Some even sabotaged their own planes, preferring court-martial to suicide. Because now, every time they saw contrails glittering above 25,000 feet, they knew what was coming. A silver shape with a red nose cutting through the air like a blade, its Merlin engine singing the death song of the Luftwaffe. The bomber escorts had become the executioners of an empire, and Schweinfurt was their proof of concept. April 1945. The Luftwaffe's final gasp. The Reich is collapsing, cities are burning, and Allied bombers roam the sky without challenge. But over southern Germany, one last desperate experiment takes flight. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, howls off a ruined runway near Munich. It's fast, terrifyingly fast, nearly 540 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than anything the Allies have. It climbs like a rocket and dives like a falling star. German engineers call it their revenge weapon. The pilots call it the miracle that came too late. On the same morning, a group of American bombers crosses the Danube, escorting them 30 P-51 Mustangs from the 357th Fighter Group. Among them, Lieutenant Clayton Yeager, a young hotshot from West Virginia, flies his red-nosed Mustang named Glamorous Glennis II. His orders: protect the bombers, don't chase the jets. But Yeager is not the kind of man who follows easy rules. At 25,000 feet, the contrails converge. The Me-262 seconds dive from the sun, their twin jet engines screaming. They slice through the bomber formation, spitting 30mm cannon fire. Two B-17 seconds go down instantly, falling like burning meteors. Then Yeager spots one. A silver-gray jet, streaking through the smoke. He throttles up. The Mustang groans, trembling near redline. The jet should leave him behind. But Yeager's been briefed. Those new engines are fragile. They overheat fast, and their acceleration fades in a turn. So he plays a different game. He cuts power, feints left, then climbs a move no one expects from a propeller plane. The Me-262 overshoots, unable to turn tight enough. Yeager flips the Mustang, lines up the shot, and squeezes the trigger. 50 caliber tracers rip through the jet's tail. The Me-262 bursts into flame, spiraling down like a dying comet. It's the first jet ever shot down by a piston-engine aircraft in a climbing turn. When Yeager lands, his crew chief looks at the bullet holes in the Mustang's nose and says, "You chased a jet." Yeager just smirks. "Caught one too." But the duel wasn't just about one kill. It was a revelation. The Me-262 was revolutionary, but fragile. A machine of genius that Germany could no longer support. The Mustang, by contrast, was a masterpiece of balance. It didn't need to be faster, just strong enough, high enough, and there first. And that was the Luftwaffe's death sentence. Every Me-262 that got airborne had to take off and land at predictable airfields. The Allies knew that. The Mustangs simply waited. When the jets came down to land low and slow, the P-51 seconds dove in from above and annihilated them. In the final weeks of the war, 262 after 262 was destroyed on approach, helpless, exposed, and out of fuel. The German jet had speed but no strategy. The Mustang had less thrust but infinite endurance, mechanical and human. By May 1945, the Luftwaffe had fewer than 200 jets left. The Americans owned the air. From Berlin to Vienna, nothing flew without their permission. In the end, the Me-262 wasn't beaten by another machine. It was beaten by a system of production, innovation, and willpower that turned the P-51 from a rushed prototype into the hammer that shattered an empire. The last German jet fell in flames just outside Munich. The pilot's final radio call said it all. They are everywhere. When historians talk about victory in Europe, they speak of D-Day, Patton's tanks, and Eisenhower's strategy. But the truth is simpler. The war in the air was already over before the Allies even hit the beaches. The P-51 Mustang killed the Luftwaffe, not in one battle, but in 1,000 small ones. Dogfight by dogfight, escort by escort, raid by raid, until the skies over Germany went from fortress to graveyard. By the spring of 1945, the statistics were staggering. Over 4,500 Luftwaffe fighters destroyed by P-51 seconds alone. More than 2,500 bombers saved from what would have been certain death. A kill ratio of 19-1, numbers that no other fighter in history has ever matched. But what made the Mustang truly lethal wasn't just the machine. It was the marriage of American industry, British engineering, and the relentless drive of ordinary men. It was a plane born of collaboration, a British problem solved by an American factory, a German idea, laminar airflow, perfected by a German defector, a Rolls-Royce heart built under license by Packard in Detroit. The Mustang was the world's first truly global weapon, proof that innovation wasn't just about invention, but integration. It fought not like a duelist, but like an ecosystem. Every time one P-51 went down, 3 more took its place. Every damaged plane was flying again within days. Pilots could rotate in and out without losing tempo. And when they took off, they knew something no Luftwaffe pilot could ever say again. They owned the sky. In captured German diaries, you see the dread in their words. The silver ones. They wait for us. We cannot shake them. They turn faster, climb longer, and never run out of fuel. The P-51 is the war. For all of Germany's technological marvels, the rockets, the jets, the wonder weapons, none of it mattered. Because while the Reich tried to build miracles, America built momentum. The P-51's legacy wasn't just its kill count, it was its philosophy. Simplicity that scaled, excellence that endured. After the war, when captured German engineers examined the wreckage of a Mustang, they were stunned. It wasn't fragile or over-designed. It was practical, efficient, every bolt exactly where it needed to be, nothing more. One of them reportedly said, "We built the best planes in the world. You built the best Air Force in the world." That was the verdict. The Luftwaffe's engineers had reached for perfection and died chasing it. America's mechanics reached for reliability and won the war. When the guns fell silent, there was no doubt left. The era of the Spitfire, the Messerschmitt, the Focke-Wulf, all of it had ended with the whisper of a Merlin engine and the silhouette of a silver-winged horse cutting through the clouds. The Mustang didn't just rule the sky. It redefined what power looked like in the modern world. Speed with stamina, beauty with purpose, strength with scale, and above all, a reminder that sometimes the weapon that ends an empire doesn't roar in anger. It hums in harmony. May 1945. The war in Europe is over. The skies that once trembled under flak and flame are quiet now, streaked with the vapor trails of homebound planes. At an airfield outside Debden, England, hundreds of Mustangs sit in perfect rows. Some are scarred, patched, bullet-pocked. Others still shine like mirrors under the fading spring sun. The men who flew them walk among the planes in silence. They don't cheer. They don't pose. They just touch the metal. For months, these aircraft had been more than machines. They were companions, extensions of will, weapons with souls. Lieutenant Henry is gone, killed by friendly fire on Christmas morning. His Mustang, Crips Mighty, was found with the throttle jammed full forward. He never flew any other way. Nearby, Old Crow sits with its canopy open. Pilot Anderson scratches a note into the aluminum with his knife. "She brought me home every time." They called it a fighter. But what it really became was a promise that no American would ever again go to war without control of the air. Factories in Detroit and Dallas begin shutting down the assembly lines. The same workers who built wings now build refrigerators, cars, radios. The war machine goes silent. But its echo becomes civilization. The Mustang doesn't vanish. It evolves. Korea, Israel, the Cold War. It keeps flying decade after decade, long after the men who designed it are gone. Even today, when a restored P-51 takes off at an air show, people stop and look up. That sound, that deep, smooth hum of the Merlin engine still turns heads. It's not noise, it's memory. A symbol of a time when the world was burning, and a handful of young pilots held the line between tyranny and tomorrow. In 1944, the Mustang turned the tide of war. But in truth, it did something even greater. It proved what happens when courage, engineering, and freedom collide. A plane built by outsiders, refined by rivals, and flown by kids barely old enough to vote, yet capable of defeating an empire. In the ruins of post-war Germany, a Luftwaffe engineer once looked at a captured P-51 and said quietly, "If we had built this, perhaps we would have survived." But they couldn't, because the Mustang wasn't just metal and math. It was philosophy, an idea that belonged only to nations free enough to let their dreamers break the rules. And when that idea took flight, the world never looked the same again. Even now, 80 years later, when you hear that engine's rise and fall, you can almost see it. The silver wings catching sunlight, the red nose cutting through clouds. A machine that shouldn't have worked, but did. A miracle born in 117 days that broke the back of the Luftwaffe and redefined the sky itself. The P-51 Mustang didn't just win a war. It proved that freedom, when engineered with purpose, will always fly higher than fear.